Hey, what is going on, guys, and welcome back to another episode of Star Wars Galaxy of Heroes. And today we are on our 34th in-depth character review, and holy cow, a huge majority of you guys wanted to see Jyn Erso as the next review. Now that the Rogue One characters are free to play, a lot of people are asking, should they farm the goddess of the Rancor raid? And I will answer many of those questions in this video. And for those of you who are curious, I now have a Patreon page open, and if you'd like, you can support my channel and get rewards such as hanging out with me on a monthly basis where we can talk, chat, talk about your roster, all that great stuff. So check that out, and I do appreciate all the support. But getting on to our review, let's get right into the history of Jyn Erso. For those of you who have not seen Rogue One yet, I highly recommend skipping this segment of the review because I may talk about stuff that you consider to be a spoiler. But if you don't care, or if you saw the movie, let's get straight into it. Born on the planet of Vault, Jyn Erso lost her parents at a young age, with her mother being murdered and her father being kidnapped by director Krennic. She was taken under the wing of Saw Gerrera and became a child soldier for his army. As she grew older, she turned to the life of committing many crimes across the galaxy, but she was eventually recruited by the Rebel Alliance to help their cause against the Empire. Although she was not initially enthusiastic about the whole cause, she became a pivotal part in retrieving the Death Star plans off the planet of Scarif, which was crucial to prevent the Empire from securing its clutch around the galaxy. Despite her valiant fight on Scarif, her and the other members of Rogue One were stranded on the planet where they made the ultimate sacrifice for the sake of the galaxy's freedom. But their efforts were not gone unnoticed as the plans made it to the Rebel Alliance in the end. In Star Wars Galaxy of Heroes, we continue to see Jyn Erso lead her fellow rebels into battle with the ability to expose their weaknesses, as well as the ability to constantly press the attack and feed turn meter to her allies. When looking at Star Wars Galaxy of Heroes, the first thing we are going to talk about is how do we unlock Jyn Erso, because as of recently, that's a really important question, because for the longest time, she was exclusive to certain tournament events and pay-to-play avenues. We can now get Jyn Erso for free in the guild store. For 400 guild currency, you can get 5 Jyn Erso shards, and due to the random nature of the guild store, you might not get her quite frequently. She's been free to play for almost 2 weeks, and I've only seen her 3 times, so it could be a long farm depending on your luck. The other ways you can get her, of course, you can get her in the Chromium packs. She does not drop as frequently as characters like Darth Maul, but there is definitely a chance you can get her there. And if you don't want to deal with the guild store, you can also get her in the daily shipments. Now, if you want an estimate time to get the 7 stars through a strictly free-to-play method on the guild store, well, you might be looking at something like 66 days to get the 7 stars if you can get 5 shards of Jyn Erso per day. Now, your luck might be way better and you can get her in double the time. However, if you have luck like me where you don't see her for 2-3 days straight, you might be looking at something like 132 days. So make sure you buckle down, and when you see those shards pop up, hop on it right away, because you don't know when they might show up again due to the random nature of the guild store. Now, knowing how to unlock her, you need to start knowing why you should unlock her and get her to 7 stars. And to help you out with that question, let's look at the stats of Jyn Erso before considering any mods and abilities, leaders, all that jazz, and let's dive straight into the pros. First off, Jyn Erso is not a slow character by any stretch of the imagination. She is number 5 in speed, with the average being 127. Jyn Erso is at 163, and to put that in perspective, she is 1 point below Rey and Princess Leia. Next on the list of pros is armor penetration, where she is number 16. Average is 52 for armor penetration, and Jyn is at 80, meaning she can try to pierce through that thick armor of Fives, Old Ben, all those big characters like that. And the last pro I want to point out is that she has 5% health steal. Let's turn the page and look at the averages, where first of all, she is number 42 in health. Average health in this game is 19,228, and Jyn is ever so slightly below that at 18,634. Kind of like health, we have protection where she is on the upper tail of the averages, I have to say, where she is number 39. Average is 19,772, and Jyn is at 19,340, so just missing that average ever so slightly. More defensive things to talk about. In armor, she is number 58. Average is 225, and Jyn is just below that at 214. Jyn Erso has some offensive things in the averages, where first of all, she is number 42 in maximum damage. Average is 5,522, and Jyn is ever so slightly above that at 5,775. And also, we have AoE. She has an AoE ability, and in the grand scheme of things, that is number 16. With the average being 2,926, Jyn is going to be at 2,986. I know this next part is rough, guys, but trust me, we'll make it through. We gotta get onto the stuff that Chewbacca wants to cry about. But one of these cons really isn't in there when we look at her kit eventually, but when we look at potency, she is actually dead last with Darth Maul and General Kenobi. Average is 31%, and Jyn Erso is at 0%. What is going on here? Don't worry, this will all make sense soon enough. And the last thing, which is actually a con, is that she is number 70 in maximum basic damage. Average is 4,349, and Jyn is at 3,975. So now we can go and look at her kit and all the abilities that she has and see how that fits in with those numbers that I mentioned, especially that 0% potency. And the first ability we are going to look at is her basic, known as Press the Attack. Deal physical damage to a target enemy with a 70% chance they gain advantage for 2 turns. So it sounds very basic, but as we will go forward, it will make more and more sense. Following this, that kind of goes hand in hand in a way with Press the Attack, is Rebel Counterattack. It has a 4-turn cooldown, and this deals physical damage to all enemies and grants the target ally 100% turn meter and advantage for 2 turns. If any critical hits are scored, she revives a random rebel ally with a 20% max health for each critical hit scored. So essentially, if you land 5 critical hits, she will revive a rebel with 100% health, and that is a pretty powerful revive. I'll talk more about this in my subjective part of the review. This next ability is what makes Jyn Erso hype-worthy, and it's known as Transient Strike. Has a very low cooldown of 2, and it deals physical damage to a target enemy and removes all turn meter. Yes, all turn meter. Jyn gains that much turn meter in return, and on a critical hit, stun the target for 1 turn. So for example, if the enemy had 99% turn meter, Jyn will attack with this, gain 99% turn meter, and essentially, if she gains a lot of turn meter, she can attack again. And with this low cooldown, that means she can use it quite frequently. And the leader ability is known as Into the Fray. This is one of her Zeta abilities. I have plenty of footage in this gameplay today, and before the Zeta, rebel allies have plus 35% potency, and enemies that suffer debuffs during rebel allies' turn have a 50% chance to also become exposed for 2 turns. And the best part is, this expose can't be resisted. After you give her the Zeta, she still has all the previous bonuses I just mentioned, plus rebel allies gain 5% protection whenever they gain a buff. Again, more on this later on. And lastly, another Zeta ability on her unique, which is called Fierce Determination. Before the Zeta, Jyn gains 10% potency each time she scores a critical hit. After Zeta, she has that same bonus, plus she is immune to stun. So I just want to stop and address this real quick. If you're wondering what's going on at that 0% potency, well, this unique addresses this. Essentially, every time she gets a critical hit, she will constantly gain 10% potency. And as you notice, her kit revolves around advantage a lot. So for example, if you get 3 critical hits, you're pretty much right at the average for potency in the game, because that is 30% potency right there. If after her AoE she scores 5 critical hits, well guess what, she just gained 50% potency, and this can constantly grow and grow and grow without any sort of end until she is defeated finally. So you know how to unlock Jyn Erso, you know her numbers, you know her abilities, you are ready to farm her. Well, just hold up a second, let me tell you about her gear requirements, and she is a somewhat average character to gear in this game. First of all, when peaking at raid gear, she will need 3 pieces, and the average is 3 as well. She will need a Mark 5 Fusion Furnace at Gear 8, a Mark 6 Nubian Design Tech, and a Mark 5 Droid Collar at Gear 9, and you are raid gear free until the end, until you start needing gold gear. She will need 220 pieces of gold gear, which is right around the average for the game. Once you get to Gear 10 finally, you will need a Mark 9 Fabritech data pad to get to Gear 11, and then once you're at Gear 11, you will need a single Mark 8 Biotech implant. When getting the purple gear, this is where she starts becoming a little more difficult to gear up. She's above average, where the average is 1,119 pieces. Jyn Erso is at 1,320, making her number 20 in purple gear requirements in this game, and the most popular pieces you are going to need are 200 Mark III Carbonti sensor arrays, 200 Mark III stun cuffs, and 150 Mark VI hypo syringes. And finally, blue, green, white gear. She's above average for blue, nothing too significant like Palpatine or Darth Nihilus, and below the average for green and white gear. Now that we have the first half of the video done with the objective stuff, we now move into the subjective part of the review, where I give you my thoughts, her best friends, mods, mortal enemies, Yoda's do or do not checklist. But first of all, let's take a look at my thoughts on this character. Jyn is just one of those characters that is all around very solid. Not the strongest hitter in the game, but she has tons of utility, and her abilities work hand in hand with one another. Her basic attack, or known as press the attack, is constantly going to be generating lots of advantage, which means she is going to be getting lots of critical hits to ensure she is reviving rebels with as much health as possible, and it allows her transient strike to stun as often as possible, and she constantly increases her potency with every critical hit. The ability to give off 100% turn meter, revive a rebel ally, and heal them at the same time is a deadly combo. It's almost as if you had First Order Officer, Daka, and Luminara all in one ability. The real shining light is Truncheon Strike, and Jyn has claimed the title of Master of the Rancor. If you have not seen it, I posted a video a while ago where Jyn Erso can literally rock the Rancor because of this Truncheon Strike, gaining turn meter, advantage, all that stuff. So I highly recommend you check it out. It was a pretty popular video with her high speed and low cooldown and the possibility to constantly stack up the potency. She's honestly the perfect choice for the Rancor raid, and highly recommend it if you're having a hard time getting lots of damage. But when it comes to her Zetas, they are not the craziest things in the world like Savage Opress or Darth Maul, but the only one I might consider adding a Zeta to is her unique, since stuns are very frequent in Arena and frequent in the Rancor raid. However, it is by no means 100% necessary. Unlike characters like Savage Opress, who really needs the Zeta to be amazing, Jyn Erso is amazing before and after Zeta, and the Zeta isn't too necessary because usually in Arena, she will be paired with characters like Captain Rex and Chirrut, who will make sure she is cleansed from that stun, but still, it is very solid if you just want to be on the safer sides of things. If you are considering running a full Rogue One team, which is very solid, then adding the Zeta to her leader might be a good idea, since they will gain lots of buffs and constantly gain protection. Overall, her Zeta is not a top tier #1 choice compared to other characters in the game. And a note about the Rancor, although hypothetically speaking, Jyn will have the highest potency in the game since it never stops increasing, the Rancor still has a very slight chance to resist, which prevents Jyn from being able to solo the whole Rancor herself. Trust me, I've tried it, it's just nearly impossible. And in terms of drawbacks, it's really hard to find any, since her kit is so robust and works in many lineups as a support character. She is not the craziest damage dealer, I suppose, and her revivability is constrained to only rebels, but even so, with so many rebels in this game, that is not a huge problem, and the leader ability is very exclusive to rebels only. Despite the fact she does not have too many drawbacks, she does have some big mortal enemies that she has to watch out for. Mainly the biggest debuffs she needs to avoid are things like ability block, shock, Daze, buff immunity, critical hit immunity are the biggest threats, because if she's ability blocked, she can't use all her great abilities. When she is shocked, she can't gain turn meter or gain any sort of buffs. When dazed, she can't gain turn meter. Buff immunity, she won't be able to gain her advantage, and critical hit immunity is important because if she's not applying critical hits, her potency is going to be rock bottom. So generally, you want to try and make sure you keep Palpatine in check, Darth Maul, characters like Count Dooku, Darth Vader, even Krennic and Death Trooper have a lot of anti-rebel stuff going on, so watch out for them. There are some other mortal enemies, but not as extreme, characters that can give tenacity up, prevent her from stunning, removing turn meter, and prevents rebels from applying debuffs, which would trigger the chance for exposed to apply, and also cleansers are an issue as well against Jyn Erso. And remember, stun is usually something that's a mortal enemy for everyone, but if she has her Zeta, she cannot be stunned. And now looking at the best friends, it's honestly a huge list. I can't put everyone on here. You honestly could have 50 characters that work well with Jyn Erso, but essentially all the rebels are great, especially Rogue One characters. A lot of great synergy among all of them. With Cassian and Baze and K2, lots of chances to apply expose. With Baze and Chiru, lots of chances to regain protection because they give off a lot of buffs. If you want to get a little experimental, she has some First Order synergy, since First Order thrives off advantage, so she can have some synergy with them. For example, if Kylo Ren does Lash Out, he gives turn meter to characters with advantage, and with Phasma constantly being able to give advantage to her team, that will only benefit Jyn Erso. Although it's overkill, Tenacity Down would actually work quite well to make sure she's constantly removing turn meter. She works great with cleansers like Chiru, Rex, Akbar, a lot of teams like that. She also works in stun teams if you want to do Dooku, Daka, Palpatine, Jyn. You can apply lots of stuns, and another obvious option are turn meter removal teams because she can remove a lot of turn meter with characters like Tebow and Bastan. There's just a lot of options. Those are just some immediate thoughts that I have. I want to talk about mods though, however. We can constantly talk about her best friends, but when it comes to mods, this is what's really important. I highly recommend going down one or two paths here. I mainly recommend either loading her up with a ton of critical chance mods, especially if you're going into a Rancor raid, or a crit chance damage combo thing going on, because you want her to get as many critical attacks as possible. Speed mods would also be a good second recommendation to make sure she's even faster. Health, tenacity, and offense would be some of my later choices if I didn't have those first several groups that I just mentioned, and she really does not need any potency mods. If you increase her critical chance, she is guaranteed to get lots of critical attacks out there and increase the potency on her own. In regards to primary and secondary mods, fill that speed up, baby. You want her to get lots of speed so she can just work her magic in arena and especially the Rancor raid. Critical chance is also perfect to trigger all those effects and her abilities that we looked at. Critical damage, protection, health are also great. And again, do not worry about loading her up with potency because she will take care of that on her own. And finally, we are looking at Yoda's do or do not checklist, where we see if Jyn Erso is viable in many aspects of the game. And hint, hint, she's pretty much useful in every aspect of the game currently. First of all, in Arena, you can use her as a leader for Rogue One characters for Rebels, or she can just play a great support character, so definitely do. Galactic War, Dark Side battles, Cantina battles are all going to be due, especially for the revive, because it's just great in case one of your rebels falls down, she can bring them back up to action. Mod challenges also a due. We have the Rebel mod challenges for tenacity mods, so if you need some tenacity mods, you can use Jyn Erso. Ships is also a due. Cassian has a U-Wing that requires K2 and Jyn, so if you want that ship, which as of now there's no farmable way to get it, but just so you know, you could use it eventually. Rancor raid, I don't think I have to say it again, but 1,000,000% due. She is the goddess of the Rancor raid. She is the perfect candidate out there. And AAT raid, she's not a #1 choice, but I have seen some gameplay of Rogue One characters and Jyn Erso doing some work, so you also could use her in the AAT raid. But that is it for this video. To conclude, let's pull up the Hall of Fame and see where Jyn Erso ranks in the entire game. If you saw my video where I ranked all the characters in the game, you may have noticed that Jyn Erso is a grand Master. Her kit is just so unique, it works really well, and it just absolutely obliterates the Rancor raid in its entirety. So I highly recommend you get this character, buckle down, and just take your time with the farming process because she will be very useful once you finally unlock her. Thank you so much for watching this episode. I hope you enjoyed it, hope you learned something, and if you want, as I mentioned earlier, I have a Patreon page you can check out if you want to be a part of my monthly group chat sessions, or I also have some t-shirts which you can purchase. Again, any help is appreciated, and most of all, liking the video, commenting down below on what you want to see next, and all that amazing stuff is just as helpful. And be sure to subscribe for more Star Wars Galaxy of Heroes content, and we will talk again soon. Peace out.